58 NFL seasons have been played since the AFL and the NFL originally decided to have their two champions play against each other in what would eventually be known as the Super Bowl. The 24 franchises that participated in that first season continue to exist, and 8 more have now been added, giving us the 32-team NFL we know today. But in this Super Bowl era, which franchise has been the best, and which franchise has been the worst? We will be answering that question today, as we not only reveal the best and the worst teams, but everybody else in between as well. And we will be using C-Score to make these determinations, this channel's metric for evaluating every single team in the Super Bowl era. As is always the case, a deeper explanation of C-Score is available in the description of this video. There were 2 ways this task could be accomplished. We could have taken the total C-Score across every season for every team, or we could have gone with the average C-Score. Going with the total score would be a massive detriment for the 8 teams that entered the NFL after 1966, especially for the very new teams. So as a matter of fairness, we are going with the average score. Yes, having fewer seasons to average out does make it easier to pull out a higher score, but it works in the opposite direction as well. With the way these rankings fell, we don't believe it went too far in either direction. Rest assured, we're not simply going to be ranking these teams by how many wins they have or how many Super Bowls they have. Every season stands on its own, and every season goes through a C-Score evaluation. Instead of revealing our rankings from worst to first, we're going to take a different path and start in the middle, working our way outward, just like how a good NFL team is built. Thank you so much for joining us. We are ready to go. We'll start at number 16 with the San Diego/Los Angeles Chargers. Over their 58 seasons in the Super Bowl era, they've pulled in an average C-score of 0.37. They make the playoffs just over 25% of the time with 15 total appearances, but only one of those has resulted in a Super Bowl appearance, a game they lost by 23 points that was never really even that close. The irony with this franchise is that the quality of their sole Super Bowl appearance doesn't remotely resemble the quality of some of their other seasons where they fail to make it all the way. Perhaps the only NFL team whose name has become a verb, chargering means having the goods yet still coming up short. Despite several excellent teams, the Chargers have never recorded the highest C-score in any one season, but they have taken the lowest score 2 separate times, the worst above-average franchise in the Super Bowl era. Dipping down to number 17 is another relocated team, the Baltimore/Indianapolis Colts. For those who haven't been longtime fans of the NFL, or are only really familiar with the Peyton Manning era, this might be a surprising spot for the Colts. After all, they've been to the playoffs 25 times, with 4 Super Bowl appearances and 2 Super Bowl titles, including the first ever post-merger title. But strewn in between those separate runs were a lot of bad, some very bad, and some absolutely terrible. After all, they've recorded the highest C-score in a single season 3 times, but they've gone in the opposite direction as well, with 4 bottom C-scores. Their average C-score per season is negative 0.326, which is the closest score to 0 amongst all NFL franchises. But the way it all breaks down in the end, they rank as the best below average franchise in the Super Bowl era. Believe it or not, we are now witnessing the largest gap between any 2 spots in this countdown. With an average C-score of negative 2.216, the Buffalo Bills rank at number 18, nearly 2 full points behind the Colts. No conversation about the Bills' history is complete, or even possible, without mentioning their 4 Super Bowl appearances among 20 playoff appearances. Of course, those Super Bowl appearances were all consecutive, and they all resulted in losses, with 3 of them not being all that close. That said, recent history is moving Buffalo up this list more than the early 1990s could, as the competition they're facing now and their overall performance remains higher, with 2 recent top C-score seasons among 3 total. There have been too many bad seasons, though, from the NFL's only team actually stationed in New York, with 3 bottom C-scores there to balance things out. Swinging back to the positive realm, the Washington Redskins / football team / Commanders rank 15th with an average of 0.453 C-score per season. Had this countdown taken place at the turn of the century, Washington would be much higher, but this century has been tough on them. They make the playoffs just under 1/3 of the time with 19 appearances, including 5 appearances in the Super Bowl and 3 Super Bowl championships, but none since 1991. In fact, they've yet to return to even the NFC Championship game since that dominant championship-winning team, with only 7 playoff appearances in total despite continued playoff expansion. They were C-Score's highest-rated team in 4 different seasons, with only 1 rooted to the bottom. Washington fans will have to hope that new ownership, after nearly a quarter century under Dan Snyder, will help right the ship. We have our first post-1966 addition to the NFL, with the 1976 expansion Seattle Seahawks ranking as the 14th best franchise during the Super Bowl era. Their average C-score of 0.887 is magnified by a 20-year run from 1985 to 2004, where they never won or lost more than 10 games in a season and never had a triple-digit point differential in either direction. Well, outside of one miserable season in 1992, that is. The lows have never gotten too low in Seattle, but the highs were often quite high. 20 playoff appearances across both the AFC and the NFC led to 3 NFC championships and 1 Super Bowl win that absolutely, positively, indisputably should have been 2. That resulted in their 2 season-topping C-scores without ever hitting absolute rock bottom. Having the highest single-season C-score in the entire Super Bowl era indeed only counts for 1 season, as 1985 can only bring the Chicago Bears to the 19th spot with an average C-score of negative 2.379. That top-rated C-score is the only time that Chicago either topped or bottomed the season standings. Otherwise, the Bears have only been to the playoffs 16 times in 58 tries, not even 30% of the time. They won that Super Bowl in 1985 and made it to another in 2006, where they fell in their attempt for a second Lombardi. Despite never having the lowest C-score in any given season, they were in the bottom 5 8 separate times, with plenty of second-to-last finishes. Maybe it's the dominance of 1985, or maybe it's the fact that they are in a massive media market, but it feels like the Bears have always been thought to be more successful than they actually are. Coming in just behind the Bears in 20th place are the Cincinnati Bengals with an average of minus 2.466 C-score per season across 56 seasons, an AFL expansion team in 1968, since he adjusted to life in the NFL very well, but they were stuck in a division with the Pittsburgh Steelers, whose dynasty essentially blanketed the entire 1970s. Once Pittsburgh went away, the Bengals were able to make 2 Super Bowls in the 80s and added another one as recently as 2021. Sadly for the Bengals, they lost all 3 games by a combined total of 12 points. They've made the playoffs 16 times, but none of those were between 1991 and 2004, a period of time that Bengals fans sullenly refer to as the lost decade. And while they were indeed quite bad during that time, only once did they have the lowest C-score in a single season, but they've yet to register a top score. We now look at the 13th highest ranked team of the Super Bowl era, the Philadelphia Eagles. They are the first team we see to pull in an average C-score of higher than 1, coming in at 1.073. Over 58 seasons, the Eagles knock on the door of appearing in the playoffs 50% of the time, getting to the postseason on 26 different occasions. They've translated that into 4 Super Bowl appearances, with their sole triumph coming in Super Bowl 52 over the New England Patriots. Eagles fans, though, may be left wanting for more, especially with some very talented teams in the late 80s and early 90s that couldn't quite close the deal, and 4 straight NFC title game appearances in the early 2000s that ended in only 1 Super Bowl appearance with no victories. Twice, the Eagles have rated out as C-Score's best team, with only 1 ranking at the very bottom. The Los Angeles/St. Louis/ once again Los Angeles Rams take our 12th spot with their average C-score of 1.845 per season. Their profile resembles the team right behind them. Like Philadelphia, the Rams have made the playoffs 26 times in 58 seasons, but they've done more with those appearances, getting to the Super Bowl 5 times with 2 ultimate triumphs. The Rams have had lots of swings, fantastic throughout the 70s, solid in the 80s, terrible for almost all of the 90s, horrific for their last decade or so in St. Louis, and mostly competitive now under Sean McVay. Those swings have led to 2 separate seasons of setting the standard in C-score, but also 3 seasons where they were rooted to the bottom. In fact, those 3 seasons were consecutive, the only such team to ever accomplish that feat. If they could erase those last seasons in St. Louis, the Rams could have been so much higher on this list. The NFL expanded by 2 teams in 1995, and one of those teams ranks right here at number 21. The Carolina Panthers, with an average C-score per season of -2.931. With the 2023 season in the books, the Panthers have now been around for exactly half of the Super Bowl era. In those 29 seasons, they've only managed to make the playoffs 8 times, but they took 25% of those runs to the Super Bowl, including a 15-1 powerhouse unit in 2015. Alas, they await their first trip to the top of the podium, with little indication that that trip will be coming anytime soon. The Panthers went the veteran route as an expansion team, which worked very well in the short term, but saw them take much longer to build any kind of consistency. They've never had the best C-score in any one season, but they've sunk to the bottom on 2 separate occasions. We've crossed -3 in average C-score, and we do it with a 4-time Super Bowl champion, the New York Giants. Those Super Bowls didn't keep the Giants from ranking as only the 22nd best team in the Super Bowl era, and there is very good reason for this. First off, 4 seasons, no matter how good they are, cannot offset 54 other seasons unless those seasons can pull some more weight. Only 17 total playoff appearances say they haven't. Second, only one of the Giants' Super Bowls displayed any kind of dominance. That was in 1986. The 1990 team was very good and a worthy champion, but the 2007 and 2011 flukes have C-scores more closely resembling a solid one-and-done team than a Super Bowl champion. Still, it's those title teams that brings the Giants' C-score up to -3.345, as their 1 top season C-score and their 1 bottom season C-score were filled in by a lot more bad seasons than good ones. On the edge of the top 10 are, okay, let's make sure we get this straight here, the Oakland/Los Angeles/Oakland again /Las Vegas Raiders, settling in at 11th place with an average C-score of 2.524. The Raiders' profile very closely resembles that of Washington's: 23 playoff appearances, 5 Super Bowl appearances, and 3 Super Bowl championships. And also like Washington, this ranking would be much higher had we stopped at the turn of the century. In the Raiders' case, they were very strong from 2000 to 2002, but it's been a trip to Misery Mire ever since. After making the Super Bowl in 2002, they've been back to the playoffs twice in 21 seasons and have yet to actually win a playoff game. Once a model franchise with one appearance each at the top and the bottom of single-season C-score, there was enough juice left for the Raiders to remain here in the top half. It's top 10 time, and after spending decades in the shadow of their forever rivals, the Denver Broncos have surpassed the Raiders and take the 10th spot here with an average C-score of 2.782. By the time the Raiders had won their third Super Bowl in 1983, the Broncos were starting to emerge and became the class of the AFC by the end of the decade. Of course, all that got them was 3 Super Bowl beatings by the far superior NFC. But the Broncos were back in the late 90s and finally got to the mountaintop in 1997. Then they went right back again in 1998. The Broncos have been to the playoffs 22 times, but have turned that into 8 Super Bowl appearances, and were able to add a third Super Bowl title. They've avoided hitting rock bottom in any NFL season, but curiously only have one season high score as well. They have lost in the Super Bowl 5 times, tied for the most ever. And now it's bottom 10 time. Our 23rd ranked team are the Tennessee Titans, going back to their days as the Houston Oilers and even briefly as the Tennessee Oilers. This franchise has been weird. They've made the playoffs 22 times, which is a better number than many of the teams we've seen in the top half. They haven't won a Super Bowl and have only ever been once, where they lost the game at the literal 1-yard line. But there's a lot of good to be found here. There's also a lot of bad. 9 teams rank behind the Titans, but none of these teams have as many bottom-ranked seasons. They are the proud owners of 6 such seasons, 4 in Houston and 2 in Tennessee. And they also have several high-profile playoff chokes on their resume. In the end, an average C-score of negative 3.741 is hung around the neck of this beleaguered franchise. Sinking deeper into the bottom 10, the New Orleans Saints take the 24th spot with an average C-score of negative 3.843. The Saints arrived in the NFL the season after Super Bowl I, debuting in 1967. Across those 57 seasons, they have a playoff success rate of less than 25%, only escaping the regular season 14 times. Yet the Saints are the opposite of the Redskins and the Raiders, for they would have been at or near the bottom if we stopped these rankings at the turn of the century. It was in fact the 2000 season where the Saints won their first ever playoff game. In time though, the Saints got very good, and they broke through with a victory in Super Bowl 44. Yet they've underachieved as well, with 3 different seasons leading the way in C-score, balancing their 3 seasons on the other side of those rankings during the 20th century. The Saints can lay claim, though, to a missing Super Bowl title in 2018. The single-digit rankings have begun. At number 9 are the Miami Dolphins, becoming the first team to clear an average C-score of 3, getting up to 3.111. The Dolphins were an AFL expansion team in 1966 and thus were eligible to play in the first Super Bowl. But they had a ways to go to get there. When the merger took place in 1970, Miami swindled Don Shula away from the Baltimore Colts, making him their new head coach, a position he held for 26 seasons. They were in the Super Bowl in 1971, and famously won the Super Bowl in 1972 with an undefeated season, before repeating as champions in 1973. Miami added 2 more Super Bowl appearances during the 80s among 25 total playoff appearances, and have only once held the lowest C-score in a single season, while holding the top title twice. Yet, since 1985, they've only made a single appearance in the AFC title game, signifying just how high this ranking could have been. We saw the largest jump between two rankings earlier in the countdown. Now we have the second largest jump. With an average C-score of 4.873, the Green Bay Packers bring us into the NFL royalty section of the countdown, coming in at number 8. We've talked a lot about that first Super Bowl. Well, it was the Packers who won that game, and then they went ahead and won the second one too, giving them 3 straight championships dating back to their 1965 NFL title. In 27 playoff appearances, they've made it to the Super Bowl 5 times with 4 victories overall. And if not for some lean years during the 1970s and 1980s, they would be fighting for the top spot in these rankings. Despite those lean years, Green Bay has never registered the lowest C-score in any season, but they have topped the charts twice. Since 1991, they have only had back-to-back losing seasons 1 time. If the top 8 is NFL royalty, then the bottom 8 would have to be the proletariat, and they are led here at number 25 by the Detroit Lions. Contrary to popular belief, the Lions haven't always or only ever been bad, but there has been a lot of bad. 13 playoff appearances means 45 times where they didn't get there. And of those 13 playoff appearances, only twice did they make it to the NFC Championship game. They've never gone further, and they are the only NFC team to never appear in a Super Bowl. And they've held that distinction since 2009. Another distinction they hold, becoming the first 0-16 team in NFL history, and becoming the first team to go winless in a full non-expansion season. Yet, only once have the Detroit Lions held the distinction of holding the lowest single-season C-score without ever getting to the top, averaging -4.615 per season. The 26th worst team is also the second worst team, pretending to be from New York while really being from New Jersey. These are the Jets, representing East Rutherford with an average C-score of -4.693, within a tenth of a point of the Lions. They have only made the playoffs 14 times, and only 12 of those have been since the merger. But it's what they did before the merger that even more than 55 years later remains the high point for the Jets franchise, where their amazing defensive performance in Super Bowl III led to a shocking upset of the powerhouse Baltimore Colts. They've never been back to the Super Bowl since, and they are the only team to compete in every season since the merger to never win the AFC. They've also never had the highest C-score in any individual season, but they've scraped the bottom twice. If by chance you thought that the New England Patriots were a lock to be number 1, then perhaps we've forgotten that the NFL existed before 2001. They reside at 7th with an average C-score of 5.08, breaking another point barrier. Yeah, the Patriots have been nothing short of phenomenal in the 21st century, making the playoffs 18 out of 23 seasons. But the previous 35 seasons, they did so only 9 times, with a lot of very bad mixed in as well. New England has the most Super Bowl appearances with 11. They're tied with the most championships with 6. They're also tied with the most losses at 5. That'll happen when you get to the Super Bowl a lot. They also hold the most combined appearances at either the top or the bottom of the single season standings, with 10, 6 at the top and 4 at the bottom. It's been the run of a lifetime, and it was enough to pull them from the doldrums of the NFL into its class of royalty. Also pushing their way into the realm of royalty over the past few seasons are the Kansas City Chiefs, taking the number 6 spot with their average C-score of 5.155. Prior to 2019, the Chiefs had been to 2 Super Bowls and they won Super Bowl IV, but they never once won the AFC. Since 2019, they've won the AFC 4 times in 5 seasons, and they've won the Super Bowl 3 times. In between all of that though, the Chiefs weren't so bad as to fall off completely. They've been to the playoffs 25 times in total, and with the exception of 2012, the last time the Chiefs have had a losing record, they've never been the bottom team in C-score for any other season. Curiously though, they've never held the top spot either, the highest ranking team never to do so. That doesn't matter much though when you have 4 Lombardis in your closet and have a legitimate chance to become the first team to win the Super Bowl in 3 straight seasons. Probably another strong candidate for the absolute bottom spot to many, the Cleveland Browns instead come in at number 27 with their average C-score of negative 5.577. This is another case of recency bias though, as the Browns were generally a pretty strong team before falling apart upon their disintegration into the Baltimore Ravens after 1995. Officially speaking, they disappeared from the league for 3 seasons, so they've only racked up 55 seasons during the Super Bowl era, making the playoffs 16 times. 13 of those were in 30 seasons though, with only 3 appearances after their 1999 rebirth. And, of course, they've never won or even been to a Super Bowl, and they've never had the best C-score in any one season. Yet only twice did they take the bottom spot in those same rankings. They're certainly meme-worthy, but 5 franchises have been worse than them in the Super Bowl era. And one of those teams are here at number 28, the Jacksonville Jaguars, carrying an average C-score of negative 5.682. Born in the same season as the Carolina Panthers, the Jaguars have seen less overall success despite a great start out of the gates. Whereas the Panthers took the veteran route as an expansion team, the Jaguars built with youth. They were both able to make their respective conference championship games in just their second season, but the Jags remained competitive and made it back to the title game in 1999. They've since been back one more time among their 8 total playoff appearances, but there's been way too much bad surrounding all of that success. They've found themselves as the lowest rated team in C-score in 3 different seasons, and while they've threatened the top spot before, they've never quite gotten there. Many arguments have been made as to who is the most snake-bitten franchise in NFL history, but in reality, it's not really much of an argument. Here they are, the Minnesota Vikings, as the 5th best franchise in the Super Bowl era, with an average season coming in at 5.231. Over the years, it's a better bet that the Vikings will be in the playoffs than they won't, with 31 such appearances. They were the final NFL champion before the merger, but lost that season in the Super Bowl. They would lose 3 more, the last one in 1976, without ever winning one and without ever going back again. They've been the top team in C-score on 4 separate occasions and have never been on the bottom. It seems inconceivable that they've never closed a deal, but in their 4 Super Bowl appearances, they've scored a combined 0 points in the first half. That's enough to undo anybody, and despite being number 5, they have to be looked upon as the most underachieving team in the entire Super Bowl era. The San Francisco 49ers take the 4th spot in this countdown, just missing an average C-score of 6, having to settle for 5.919. The Niners just miss a 50% playoff rate, getting there a total of 28 times. Before the 1980s, they had fits and starts of competitiveness, but the arrival of Bill Walsh as head coach, combined with the ownership of Eddie DeBartolo Jr., made the 49ers the model franchise in all of American professional sports. They won 5 Super Bowls in 14 seasons, going a stellar 5-0 in those games, and becoming the first team to ever win 5. Ever since, they've been mostly either really good or really bad. They have been good enough to get back to the Super Bowl 3 more times, but the magic of the old days wasn't to be found, taking the loss each time. 4 separate times the Niners had the league's highest C-score in a season, but 3 different times they've been on the other end of the spectrum. The NFL's newest team hasn't been able to garner much traction over the years. The Houston Texans rank at number 29, 4th from the bottom, with their average C-score of -6.667. Debuting in 2002, the Texans took the field in their first game against the Dallas Cowboys, and they won that game. They haven't done a large amount of winning since. In 22 seasons, they have made the playoffs 7 times, many as a result of winning a weak division. They've won some playoff games, but they are the only NFL team never to play in a conference championship game, despite once holding a 24-point first-half lead in a divisional round playoff game before losing that lead by halftime. Still, despite never having the best C-score in any individual season, they've only bottomed out 1 time. If it wasn't called chargering, it may have been called falconing. With an average C-score of -6.72, the Atlanta Falcons rank at number 30, leaving only 2 franchises in the dust behind them. While Miami was debuting in the AFL in 1966, Atlanta was doing the same in the NFL, and, well, quite frankly, they were horrific, at least for the first 3 seasons. They showed some life, but were generally not all that competitive. They've been to the playoffs 14 times, less than 25% of the time, but they've parlayed those appearances into 2 NFC championships. They lost the first time they were in the Super Bowl, and they used their second Super Bowl appearance as a tax write-off, given that it was a charitable donation. Despite a handful of good seasons, Atlanta has never topped any single season in C-score, but they've hit rock bottom 4 times. The most stable franchise of the Super Bowl era are the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that stability, along with excellent play on the field, brings them to the number 3 spot, with an average C-score of 7.265 per season. Pre-merger life was not good for the Steelers, with 1 postseason appearance since 1933, 0 postseason wins, and in fact 0 postseason points scored. Then came the 1970s, and with it the rise of Pittsburgh into NFL royalty. They've had more playoff appearances than any other AFC team, getting there 33 times in 54 chances. They were the first franchise to win 3 Super Bowls, 4 Super Bowls, and 6 Super Bowls among 8 total appearances. They're tied for the most Super Bowl titles of all time, and remain the only franchise to win back-to-back Super Bowls twice. They took a single bottom C-score before the merger, but they've been on top 4 times. Perhaps the model franchise in all American professional sports. The next couple of entries may be the cause of some controversy, starting right here at number 2. It's the Baltimore Ravens, with an average of 8.842 C-score per season. We talked about the difference between total C-score and average C-score at the beginning of the video, and the one team who truly benefited by us going by the average are the Ravens, who, by official decree of the NFL, only debuted in 1996. Of course, we all know that they were the Cleveland Browns, and they didn't have to go through the traditional expansion route that involves building a roster from scratch and paying the NFL a substantial fee. But other teams have had the same opportunity as the Ravens to excel in a shorter period of time, and while those teams were at a disadvantage, they've lagged way behind. Baltimore's playoff rate is over 50%, 15 appearances in 28 seasons, and they've been to and won 2 Super Bowls, including one with a historically good defense in 2000. They've never ranked last in C-score in any season, and they've worn the crown of highest C-score 3 times. If the Ravens were to take on the seasons of the Cleveland Browns from 1966 to 1995, which is their linear history, then they would have still ranked 8th on this list. And here is the second consecutive entry that may prove controversial, with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking the 31st spot, making them the second worst franchise in the Super Bowl era, while holding an average C-score of negative 7.447 per season. Their debut in 1976 was as bad as it gets, going 0-14 and only occasionally resembling something that approached competitiveness. They then lost the first 12 games of the next season before scraping by with a couple of wins. In 48 seasons, they have only made the playoffs 14 times and ranked last in single-season C-score 3 times. That's the bad. Now for the good, which is very, very good. They've had the highest C-score in 2 different seasons. They've been to the Super Bowl twice, and they've won the Super Bowl twice. They're 18 spots behind the Eagles at number 13, but they've won 1 more Super Bowl than they have. They are 26 spots behind the Vikings at number 5, yet they've won 2 more Super Bowls than they have. The Eagles, the Vikings, and many other teams ranked ahead of the Buccaneers would swap places with them on this list in exchange for their overall resume, taking those awful years in exchange for those 2 Super Bowl trophies, and rightfully so. But on a season-by-season basis, even with those 2 magical seasons, 46 other, mostly not-so-magical seasons carry a lot of weight. If you've been keeping track, it should have been clear the moment that Tampa Bay was revealed as our number 31 team that this franchise, the St. Louis/Phoenix/Arizona Cardinals, would be bringing up the rear. And indeed, here they are, ranked at number 32 out of 32 teams, the worst NFL franchise of the Super Bowl era. Their average C-score per season over 58 seasons is negative 8.01. They've been to a Super Bowl and almost won it, and they've even taken a single-season C-score title during the weird 2015 season. But the rest is ugly. Only 3 teams have fewer playoff appearances than the Cardinals: the Panthers, the Jaguars, and the Texans. Carolina and Jacksonville only debuted in 1995, while Houston only debuted in 2002. With only 9 playoff appearances to their name, the Cardinals make it to the postseason just barely over 15% of the time. For every single season they do make it, there are 6 more seasons where they don't. They've accomplished all of this while remaining under the radar. I believe if you ask NFL fans who the worst NFL franchise is, the Browns and Lions would probably receive about 75% of the vote combined, with some scattered responses going toward a few other teams. But it's the Cardinals, and one 9-7 season where they got hot for 1 month does not obscure a large number of terrible seasons, 3 of which dropped them to the bottom spot in the single season standings, among 17 seasons in the bottom 5, making them almost twice as likely to be in the bottom 5 of the league than to be a playoff team. This is truly pitiful. We've arrived at the number 1 spot, and by the process of elimination, you've probably known for a little while now who this was gonna be. This will please many, and it will annoy many, but the reality speaks for itself. The best NFL franchise of the Super Bowl era is the Dallas Cowboys, and they have the C-score to prove it, with an amazing average of 9.824 per season. Just for a little perspective, the 3 bottom teams on this list, the Cardinals, the Buccaneers, and the Falcons, over a combined 164 seasons, have surpassed that number a total of 21 times. Yet the Cowboys have averaged it over a 58-year period. Their 36 playoff appearances are the most in this era, making them better than a 3-2 chance of getting there in any given season. They've been to 8 Super Bowls and have won 5 of those. They've had more seasons with the highest C-score than any other franchise, achieving that feat 7 times. They did bottom out to close the 80s, giving them one spot on the opposite end of that spectrum as well. It's true that Dallas hasn't been back to a Super Bowl since 1995. In fact, they've yet to even make it back to the NFC Championship game since 1995. But those 30 seasons between 1966 and 1995, the vast majority of which involved a whole lot of winning, they were so strong that they're still number 1. In fact, the only chink in the Cowboys' armor is that they just couldn't get past the Steelers during the 70s. If they could have won one of those Super Bowls against them, or maybe even both, there probably wouldn't even be much of a discussion on this matter. And also, but for the 49ers finally knocking them off in 1994, the Cowboys could have, and probably would have, won 4 straight Super Bowls. Love them or hate them, the Cowboys are number 1. That was admittedly an odd way to reveal this list, but I wanted to save the best and the worst for the end, and I thought I could be odd and creative at the same time. Here is the entire list in order for those who would be more interested in looking at it that way. I've saved this part for now to see exactly who watched the video all the way through. This isn't a list of the most successful teams in the Super Bowl era, because as stated earlier, the Vikings would swap their franchise history with the Buccaneers in a second. It is a list of the best teams by C-score on a season-to-season basis, and on that basis alone, no one can argue that Tampa should rank ahead of Minnesota. But I'm sure I'll hear about it anyway. Thank you so much for making it this far into the video. This was a longer one, but we did have 32 NFL franchises to cover. Do the whole YouTube thing if you don't mind too much. Like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel, and ding that bell for notifications on all future videos. As always, please feel free to share your thoughts on this list. Were there some teams you thought would rank higher? Lower? Perhaps you were upset that the Canton Bulldogs were not included? Whatever it is that's on your mind, sound off in the comments section below. Thank you once again for joining us, and until next time, I hope you have an awesome day.